Hello, hello, it's me, Arden Lee. I'm back with another video, and today I want to talk about how to get over a traumatic experience. Before I get into today's topic, I would love to invite you to subscribe to my channel. I want to be in your feed. I want to hear from you. If there are videos that you would like me to make on certain subjects, I would love to hear from you in the comments. Feel free to leave me a comment and tell me what you think. And now for the subject that I want to talk about today. I was inspired to make this video because I was looking around on YouTube. I was typing some stuff into the search bar, and I forget what I was typing in, but I must have started typing in how to, and I saw that one of the search terms that was popular was how to get over a traumatic experience. And I thought, wow, how great that people are searching for that, because if you're searching for how to get over a traumatic experience, and if that's what led you to this video today, then you're already taking the first step to what you need to do to get over that traumatic experience, which is to admit that you have had a traumatic experience happen to you. And that sounds a little flip, but I'm really being serious here. I'm not exaggerating, because one of the things that we are very, very susceptible to when we undergo trauma is repression. If you guys saw the recent interview that Lady Gaga did on the Stephen Colbert Show, she was talking about believing Dr. Christine Blasey Ford with her the allegations that she made of sexual assault against Brett Kavanaugh. And essentially Lady Gaga compared having something happen to you, having an experience of trauma happen to you. If you can't deal with it right away, there have been people asking, why did she wait 35 years to come forward, or how come she remembers being assaulted, but she doesn't remember how she got to the party, or she doesn't remember how she left the party. So one of the things that Lady Gaga talks about in that interview is, she says, when you have something traumatic happen to you, oftentimes, if you need to continue your survival in that moment, you can't think about it, you can't process that in that moment. You put it away in a box, she says, and you close that box, and you shut that away and put it somewhere else until you can think about it again and have the space to think about and process that trauma and unpack it again. And what she says is that if you see your assailant being nominated for a Supreme Court position, of all things, then that box can open up and you can remember everything that happened, and that's when you feel like you need to come forward and speak about it. So depending on the kind of trauma that you've been through, there are certain kinds of things that happen to us that we don't have the luxury of putting into those boxes. One of my traumatic experiences was plastered all over the New York Post. I don't know if you know that story about me. I don't really feel like going into it again in this particular video, but I had a traumatic experience happen to me that I did not have the luxury of repressing. It's kind of weird to think that repressing something is a luxury, but in a weird way, it was actually in many ways easier for me to deal with than the traumatic experiences that I had in private that I was able to repress, because I remember in those moments making a choice, even if it was an unconscious one, making a choice and saying, do I want to deal with this? Do I want to deal with the repercussions of this? Or do I just want to pretend that it never happened? Do I just want to keep this private and not have to deal with it and not have to talk about it? And there were so many experiences that I had of trauma that I was really intensely ashamed about. I was really intensely ashamed that I had allowed them to happen, that I didn't have stronger boundaries, that for whatever reason, I landed in those situations, and I knew I was going to be judged. I felt very strongly that I was going to be judged. I felt that there wasn't going to be empathy for me, that there was that somehow these things were my fault and I was going to be blamed for them. And given what we've seen in our culture recently, I don't blame myself for thinking that way, because it's very possible that would have happened indeed. So if you're already here watching this video, you already understand that you have had a traumatic experience and you're looking to get over it. And that's the first thing that I want to say is congratulations and thank you and good job for taking that moment to say, I've had something happen to me and I want to heal. I want to get over this. I want to get past it, because honestly, that's no small thing. There are so many experiences that happen to so many people where they just pretend that it didn't happen and they say it's fine, I'm just not going to deal with that. If nobody else knows about it happening, then it's like it never happened. And I felt that way about many things that I underwent for a long time. And in that, what I didn't realize was that my story, my narrative, was not just comprised of other people's perceptions of me. It was actually also comprised the entire time of my internal experience. And I didn't necessarily know that, because I felt that lying to myself, which sounds more nefarious than repressing things. They're essentially the same thing, there's just a different sort of connotation. Lying to myself about what had happened, even if I wasn't doing it purposefully, even if I wasn't trying to be deceitful, even if it was out of self-preservation, ultimately was not an effective strategy for my feeling better, because somewhere in my mind and in my body, I still knew that all these things had happened to me, and it took me a really long time to uncover them. And looking back, I can see all of the ways that those experiences formed subsequent thoughts I had about myself, decisions that I made for myself, things that I allowed and did not allow into my life, secrets that I was unconsciously keeping from myself, from other people, and it didn't make it any easier to heal. I was not able to get out of environments that were conducive to that kind of trauma, because I was repressing the fact that it was happening. I was telling myself that everything was really fine. So that's the first thing I want to say about this. If you're already here watching this video, you have already taken the first step. Now, the next step that you want to do is you want to realize that ultimately, as we're going through our lives and as we're walking through the world, there may not be any surefire way to protect ourselves from further harm. As we know, victimization can happen to anyone. And even if you decide never to go out walking by yourself in a empty parking garage after 9 p.m., even if you're never going to wear another short skirt, even if, whatever it is, however you try to prevent these things from happening, there is no surefire guarantee. And even though you may want to take measures to protect yourself in whatever ways feel good to you, that you feel good about. For me, for example, it was about removing myself from certain environments, both because those environments were more conducive to my experiencing pain and trauma, and also because a lot of those environments reminded me of my pain and trauma in ways that were very unpleasant. In many ways, the entire city of New York reminds me of my trauma and feels far more conducive to further painful traumatic experiences happening. Whether that's actually true or whether it just feels that way for me, it doesn't matter. I like being in a different environment better. I've moved to Los Angeles and I'm a million times happier here than I was there. So taking those precautions is certainly one thing, and I absolutely advise you to do what feels good, to do what feels safest to you. And yet at the same time, I also advise you to understand that as we go through our lives, we are likely going to have experiences that are not fun, that are painful, that are maybe even traumatic. And even if we were to go so far out of our way to protect ourselves from things like assault, like or theft, from people who are out to harm us in any, way, shape, or form, we're still going to experience grief when our loved ones die, when our pets die. We're still going to experience things like fear or rage or whatever kinds of unpleasant emotions we're experiencing. So what I would love to advise you to get in the habit of when you're looking to get over traumatic experiences is that understanding that it's possible to process these emotions and release them from your emotional body. Now, what does that mean, right? Well, when I was repressing things, I learned this from a book called The Body Keeps the Score by Bessel van der Kolk. I feel a little weird about um, referring people to his work because I have since found out that there have been many allegations from his own staff that he has bullied them, which I find highly ironic given that he is a trauma researcher. But, you know, I learned a lot from the book before I knew this. It was a helpful resource, so I'm just going to put that out there with that disclaimer too. So I don't 100% endorse this guy because it seems like he's got some hypocrisy going on, and I don't like the way he addressed his allegations either. He came forward with a whole bunch of people who were willing to say he was a nice guy, but if you know anything about trauma, you can have 50 people who say you're a nice guy and you can still, you know, traumatize another person, and that doesn't make it invalid. So sometimes there are people who bring forth works of genius and then in their own lives they contradict them. I try not to be one of those people, so it is what it is. But I learned from this book, The Body Keeps the Score, that when you repress things, when you repress these experiences, they don't go away. Your body holds on to them. And ultimately, what started happening to me is I had repressed so many painful, traumatic experiences that I didn't want to be in my body anymore. My spirit, my soul, my consciousness did not want to exist in my body. Now, how is that possible? I live in this body. It's not possible until the day I die. I'm going to live in this body. But what ended up happening was that the sensory, the sensors, the sensors in my body, the things that experience what my body is feeling, began to shut off. It began to say, "There's too much in here already. We can't deal with anymore. We're already overloaded, so we're just going to shut this off, and we're not going to feel anything at all." And well, that was a problem, because if you can't feel what feels good or bad to you, then you can't prevent more traumatic experiences from happening, because you lack discernment to know when something feels bad and you want to draw a boundary against it. I hope that makes sense, right? So in being desensitized by the fact that I had repressed all of these traumatic experiences, I couldn't live in my body anymore because my body no longer wanted to feel things. I often describe it like my body was an episode of Hoarders, you know? It had all of this clutter in it that I had just never cleared out because I kept repressing and repressing and repressing. I had filled so much of that box with so much trauma, the way that Lady Gaga describes when you put it in a box and you shove it away. I had put so much into my trauma box in my body that my whole body was full of this clutter, and my spirit was like, we don't want to go in there. We can't live in there. This is an uninhabitable space. So essentially, my body shut off and I started just completely living in my head. And to be fair, that's part of what gave me my gift for rational analysis and for thought and synthesizing ideas and doing the kind of analysis that I now am able to guide people through in the Repatterning Project, which is the 8-week course and community around it that I created in order to help people heal from their traumatic experiences and repattern any beliefs they may have that were assimilated into their belief systems through those traumatic experiences, or even just through their social conditioning. You don't have to have trauma to have beliefs that are not serving you assimilate into your belief system because of what you've learned from your external experiences. So what I want to emphasize in this video on how to get over a traumatic experience is that the first thing to do is admit that it's happened. And even if you don't want to come forward publicly, that's absolutely your decision. There is nothing that is more important than the way that you feel about how you deal with it. So whether you want to come forward publicly, whether you want to make a Facebook post about someone who harmed you, come forward in your community and request transformative justice, or maybe you just want to find a friend or a counselor, a professional to talk to about it and go through it and work through it and admit that it happened and process that anger and that grief and that rage and that sadness. And what you'll find is that experiencing your emotions around what happened. And allowing yourself to rage and process and grieve is actually what allows those emotions to move through the body. So the more you allow yourself to feel it, the more you can just get it out and get it through. Things have to come up to be released, right? It's kind of like vomiting. As gross as a metaphor as that is, if you want something to leave your body, it has to come up. There has to be a purge. And the purge is not always a pleasant experience, but there is a catharsis to it. And it doesn't have to be awful. It doesn't have to be a complete reliving of your trauma and your grief. It just has to be enough to acknowledge that something happened to you and that you don't want that to happen again, and that you're no longer in alignment with experiences like that, and doing whatever it takes to get you back to your center, back to that space where you can say, okay, I'm going to go through life and I'm not going to be able to prevent painful things from happening to me, but I know what I can do is that whenever something happens, I can feel it, I can talk to trusted friends and professionals about it, I can seek the kind of transformative justice or not that I feel is going to be the best for my healing, and then I can move on with my life, and I can remember that there are also wonderful things in my life to experience, and I want to be able to have my body feel things. I want to be able to feel joy and feel happiness, and I want to align myself with that too, and I want to find all of those better experiences again. And I trust in my own ability to discern and to process the emotions that I don't want to store in my body, so that I can get back to living my life, and I can move on from my past, and I can change my narrative too, and I can look at all the things that happened to me, and I can say, you know what, I learned lessons from those, and they made me a stronger person, and they showed me how much I can endure. So if you have gone through a traumatic experience, I just want to let you know that it is absolutely possible to heal from it. I'm certainly living proof of that. I've been through a fuck ton of trauma in my life, and I'm so done with it. And I'm so excited about moving on and really geeking out on what it means to be happy. And so when things do happen to me, when they come up, I work through them, I process them, and then I let them go. And I say, what do I need to learn from this? What do I need to do to assimilate, to assimilate this experience into, into my history in a way that is ultimately going to serve me, and that is ultimately going to be a positive force, and what is all the negativity, the grief, and the rage, and the anger that I want to work through and then process and release. So I wish you the best, and if you do want more support, I do encourage you to stick around and check out the videos that are on my channel, and join the free Facebook group that I have in the description box for more support from like-minded peers who are seeking the same thing. And thank you for joining and watching today.